And police officers are not held to the same standard as a recruit. So. And the city is liable, whether it's a part-time employee or not, for workers' compensation, any employee that comes to work for the city.
Even our volunteers, we have to cover. Anybody else have any questions? Anything from the public?
I've never heard of an annuitant's physical. However, the idea that a police officer doesn't have to go through it again, well, they do if they change departments or they go outside their department and come back. Because I know this personally, that my husband had to beat out 21-year-olds after, when he was 30-something, when he came back to California. He made it. But in any case, I still would like to put forward that I'm concerned. Our annuitant officers have a world of knowledge, and certainly they could bring that to our department. But quite frankly, if they retired because they're old, like me, or they're retired because of some physical problem, I don't think the city should have them out on the streets, and we have to be compensated. We will have to be compensating for their not enough physical prowess. I would like to say that maybe those officers, if they're hired, be put in office and get some new young ones out there. Thank you.
Christy Munt, as a retired person, I wouldn't want to go back to work, and I do not want police officers on the street that are not physically able to do the job. I want, as Ilona said, they have a great knowledge. Their knowledge could be put to use in certain areas, but I do not want to see retired officers out on the street driving cars, giving tickets, because if something happens and they have to chase after somebody, I'm 67 years old. I do not want to run and chase after anybody, even though I'm in much better shape than I was 3 years ago. But we have to think about this as a city liability thing, that if something would happen to them while they are working for us and retired at the same time, could put us in a big hole. So I'm not in favor of this. I would much rather see many more of those young officers here. And to that, we need to pay our officers more. Thank you.
Okay. Please keep in mind, everybody, that this is a policy statement. That's all this is. Nothing more, nothing less. Just for education. Yes, sir.
Good evening, Al Hudson again. I was 70 years of age when I volunteered, my wife and I volunteered with the U.S. Forest Service, wearing the same uniforms as their LEOs, it's law enforcement officers and such. And we interacted with a variety of people, the same ones that the officers interacted with and responded to. And I have my disabilities, and that didn't stop anything. So that is so much for that. The state has what's called a boomerang program. And there's a questionnaire right here, and it asks, if I am receiving disability retirement benefits, can I still work as a retired and attenuant? And the answer is yes, as long as they're in compliance or get permission from CalPERS. If y'all would like a copy of this, I will happily give it to you.
Yeah, if you could, do you have a copy that you can leave here?
Yes, I do.
We have all of the same things in file already.
Okay, because I'd like to see that.
Okay, and I would also like to point out Sacramento Police Officers Association versus the City of Sacramento. That's 147 Cal App 4311. And in that, the court said a policy to hire police force retirees as temporary non-career employees to remedy a short-term staffing or shortage involve one of the most fundamental management prerogatives in the public sector, and that is public safety. And the policy is set by the city council, not a city manager, because the city council has the obligation to protect the public, and setting reasonable guidelines that they have to work within is okay, as long as it's within the officer's capabilities. So yes, we should, and this boomerang program is not just for police officers. That's to fill any shortages. So we have a database here that we could tap into to fill various other shortages of personnel within the city.
Oh, cool. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for the information. Anybody else?
Mr. Mayor, Council, Ron Smith. I'm just a citizen. I've had experience with a couple of our retired police officers. It's probably on tape. One time a sergeant touched me, and he was so strong he literally made me fall over on the floor there. Recently there was another retired sergeant. He saw me trying to show someone to put a sleeper hold on. He offered to put that sleeper hold on me. We have a couple sergeants that are recently retired. Wasn't too long ago that they were on the streets, were serving. One of the things that I know is somewhat difficult for people that move to our community. The lady streets are to the north. The tree streets are to the south. And good luck with the numbered streets. And if you don't know that Hacienda has some pretty breaks in it going up to the hill, we have guys that know our community, and there may be others. But we've got a lot of gray. I think gray is nice. We have a lot of white hair that's floating around here. There's a lot of wisdom, and I would encourage you, be very careful. I know when I take my commercial driver's license physical every 2 years to be able to drive a church van, that physical is not something that my nurse wife is very impressed with when I tell her that I passed my physical. And so there is something that occurs. There is something that occurs with the retiree being receiving a physical versus a 22-year-old police officer or 22-year-old firefighter, what they go through. So I would encourage you to make use of the experience that we have in our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Nobody else can bring it back up here. Looking for a motion.
Some discussion.
All discussion.
As what I consider fairly physically fit 66-year-old, I think that I could get out there with these young whippersnappers and perform on a physical fitness test as well as they can. So I think maybe my 30 years with martial arts has kept me in decent shape. But I think that each individual, it's all different. You know, all of us go down the road of life differently. Some people can perform a lot better as they get older. Some can't. So I think that, you know, if we're going to hire different officers, like for police officers, I think the chief can make a determination, like say, okay, Mr. Mayor, you're not fit, but we can keep you in a, and I'm not picking on you, but you could say you could keep you in the office.
At least you didn't call me Madam Mayor, so
I didn't. But you understand what I'm saying. So what I'm saying is I think that's an individual item, and Chief Hurtado knows what he needs. And if you think that the officer, and you know the liability of the city also, so the only thing I say is that I like this thing, except I think that I think that the chief of police should have some say in making the determination of who is selected, because if he sees that John Doe can't do the job as a patrolman, then he should be able to determine that. And if he thinks that John Doe can maybe sit in the office and do work that sworn officers should be out patrolling, you know, he should be able to make that determination. So I'm kind of for a little modification to the last sentence and have it not just the city manager, but also involvement with approval, have the chief of police involved in the who he gets, you know. So, thank you.
So once again, I'm about to be very unpopular. I believe physical prowess and the ability to physically be on the streets is a very important part of law enforcement. Physically fit, I would want this definition expanded some. If somebody's been retired on injury or somebody's gone off on disability, I don't want them back on the police department. I want people, I see you, Al. I'm excited about the young people. But I would be as excited about a 60-year-old if they could do the same physical job, the same physical requirements across the board as somebody who's 22. I think for liability purposes, for the way our department is growing, we need officers who can be out on the street and do the job the same as every officer out there across the board. We don't need any, this is not, in my opinion, this is not anything that's being fair to everyone. I see you, Al. Al's giving me double thumbs down. And it's just my opinion, and I'm only one voice up here. But I strongly believe that we need to be fair to everyone, fair to the citizens. I want police officers out there who don't have a higher propensity for injury or repeat injury or anything like that. And I'm sorry, Chief, but that's how I feel.
You're going to wait? I've always come to my job as a fiscal responsible person. I look at the possibility of bringing someone in part-time without the bennies on their paycheck and look at that as a cost savings. And if there's a way to put them to use, not necessarily jumping fences and tackling German shepherds, they can provide in any particular department. We don't even have to be talking about the police department. It can be in the planning department. It can be in finance. It can be anywhere else. These people can be tremendous assets to our city at a cost savings. And that, I think, is a very significant point. I think that after Mr. Hicks retired as finance director, he came back and consulted for years as a retired person and assisted the city with the finance department. So there is a place for these people, and that is the purpose of this item on the agenda. It is just to say that when we have a key that fits into a certain lock and they can do a job for us, let's turn the key and use these people if they're here for us. And that, I think that's why I wanted to see it on tonight's agenda. So anyway, it looks good to me.
I was a police officer for 18 years. In 1976, I got shot in the stomach, broke my left wrist, crashed a helicopter and broke my back, all working for Imperial County Sheriffs. It took me a year to get back on patrol, on again, off again. The mind is willing, sometimes the body isn't. But I agree with Dr. Lasinovich, the wealth of knowledge that these officers have, that Mr. McGuire or Mayor McGuire and I have right now, is unobtainable with these new recruits. You know, we need field training officers that can take these younger officers and show them the streets and keep them safe and show them how to do their jobs. And these officers can do it, so I'm all in favor for them.
My one thing on this, being a police officer or being a firefighter, either or, it's a young, forgive the saying, but it's a young person's game. As we get older, the last couple of years I worked, I hated getting in fights because it took so long to heal, and it hurts.
But it's such a good hurt.
Yeah, but when you're younger, you don't feel it. To this day, I feel it. My wrists are shot, my knees are shot, my back is shot, and I deal with it every day. It takes a toll. The two people that people have been referring to, but don't want to say the names, they are friends. And the last thing I want to do is see them hurt. I don't want to see them hurt. So, you know, Cal City is not what it used to be, folks. It's a big difference now. And so their wellness and well-being is a definite concern for me. Doesn't mean that I disagree with the statement, because we're talking a statement, a policy statement. If that's going to be said, that's it. I don't want to see anybody get hurt. But other than that, looking for a motion.
Go ahead, make a motion to approve the recommendation.
Got a first, looking for a second.
I'll second that.
First by Councilman Lucinovich, second by Councilman Paris. Can we have a roll call vote on this, please?
Councilmember Johnson,
No and absolutely no.
Lucinovich,
Yes.
Paris,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Stump,
Yes.
Mayor McGuire.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Okay, we are going now. Did we want to stop for a second and have him look at these, or do it later and bring it back?
We can look at them now. Let's do that.
Okay, go. Okay, do you have any? Bear with us, we're going back to CC1 with the missing checks, so we can get this off our plate and we can move forward. Petty cash, change. Check 6-2. Good to go? Yeah, I didn't, there's nothing. Yeah, that could break us. Does anybody have any questions on the missing checks? You're good, sir? Ma'am? Sir? Looking for a motion to approve the.
I make that motion. Approve the checks that were missing and now we've reviewed.
And that was from 105,049 to 105,078.
Second.
Madam Clerk.
Councilmember Johnson,
Yes.
Lucinovich,
Yes.
Paris,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Stump,
Yes.
Mayor McGuire.
Yes, thank you.
Motion-
Thank you, everybody, for getting that done. Thank you. Okay. NB3, temporary wells at cannabis business locations. Mr. Stockwell.
So, Mayor, members of the council, we have been working with 3 businesses in particular to trying to find a way for them to access the city's water system along Cal City Boulevard, all the way from the West Way Station back into Barron, where the water lines currently end. And in the final analysis, when we put together the cost of extending the water line for the long-term use, it was $4 to $5 million to do that. The city's ordinance clearly states that water wells in the city must be built to the city's standard and when put in, dedicated to the city as part of its municipal water system. And so the discussion that I'm asking the council to have is the one that as a staff we need to find out whether there is some feeling on the council that we should venture down the road of allowing temporary wells to be placed in places where businesses need access for a period of time while the system catches up with them. The Public Works Director is adamantly opposed to this and would expect him to state so tonight. But what we have been often accused of is standing in the way of getting businesses to go forward, and so I bring this to the council for a discussion. It is possible that we could allow the construction of water wells, storage tanks, and pressure pumps at these 3 locations that would meet the technical aspects of the fire code and would provide water for these businesses to operate. But by doing it for these 3, we would have to be willing to do it for anyone else similarly situated anywhere else within the city. The other element of this is that the understanding that would come from these 3 particular applicants, and we should apply to anyone else that would do this, is a recognition that as soon as it's possible to connect to the city's water system, that they would terminate these wells and immediately connect to the city's water system, paying whatever proportion of the cost of that line extension would have been their responsibility going forward. And so it is purely a temporary situation, but as is the case with a lot of temporary situations, things that are anticipated to last for a few years have a tendency to stay around a lot longer. And so it's a very serious matter for the council to consider. But at the same time, we are to the point where with these particular businesses, we need to let them know if there's any possibility that a system could be worked out that would allow them to proceed forward with their businesses. In the case of these businesses, there are 2 of them that likely could get into construction very shortly. The other one is probably further out. And so we're saying it's an option. It's not the best option, and it's probably not the best policy for the city in its water system. It may open us up to questions on multiple areas of concern. But clearly it would have to be with the understanding that this is a temporary access to allow the businesses to move forward, and that alone. And that we would expect that as the city extends its system out toward Wonder Acres, which we at some point will have some obligation to serve, but we are not under any current demands or requirements or expectations of connecting Wonder Acres. But at some point it makes sense because it is part of the city. And I think everybody's expectation was that as the system developed out there. So with that, we'd be happy to answer any questions and address anything that arises both from the council and the public as we consider this option at this point.
Thank you, sir. We're going to bring it up here first, and then we'll kick it out to the public, and then we'll come back. Any questions? Sir.
The city did have preliminary design work done on extending water to Wonder Acres. and that the plan was to have a water tank there, and there was a need for the water system at Wonder Acres as being slightly less than perfect?
No, the design, the way to take the water out there is to install 16 to 24-inch water lines all the way out to Westway to put in at least a 500,000 gallon storage tank and booster pumps at well 2. So that we would use the existing city system, not drill any additional wells, because we know we have adequate supply.
I think that's what I just said. I think that's that what happened was that when the city annexed to Highway 14, that the residents of Wonder Acres were using Mojave water, and that the city was under some form of obligation at the time to have a plan for providing them with city water system and to vacate the Mojave water system that they're using currently. And I do believe that a number of years ago there was a bacterial infection in their water system, a coliform contamination, and that brought forward the need for developing the system. And I think that the previous Public Works Director actually started searching out monies and started developing a plan for developing that said system. Now, that's all I was saying. It's not to go beyond that. We started the work on doing this, on making this happen. The one thing that can certainly happen if we were to develop a water line all the way to Wonder Acres is an incredible amount of Cal City Boulevard would be open for development. That's a good thing economically. You know, if we want to encourage development, that's a wonderful thing. Is it realistic to expect that we can build that pipeline now? It's been my understanding that some of these developers have proposed to give us at least some money towards such a project. Is that true?
We've had offers of building a 2,000 home subdivision out there and spending $1 billion, but none of that has come to fruition. The most recent negotiations we had with them were talking about creating a situation where they would they put money into an escrow account that they would then contract for the construction to city specifications, and then it would be dedicated to the city. That process was also rejected by all 3 of the applicants. And so one only wants to put $300,000 into the process, the fair share of what it will take to provide water both to the first one, because to get water to the first one, you have to have the ultimate system built.
Sure, of course.
So
designed.
they claim that their share of that should be $300,000. The others were not prepared to fund the remainder of the cost. We had, for the purpose of discussion, recognizing that it ultimately would be a decision made by the council, proposed that the city, because of the need to ultimately expend there, might pay up to 25%. And so with those discussions, that's where we finally came to the realization that there was going to be no agreement. And so these entities would put the money that they would have dedicated to the construction of the line into building their own temporary systems for the time being to allow them to get up and operate.
By the project that Councilman Lucinovich was describing. So the city had looked at a project and put together a preliminary cost for a tank and a booster set of pumps to actually provide fire protection. Chlorine system was actually added. Coliform is actually very common within water supplies, and most water agencies actually do precautionary treatment, low doses of chlorine to prevent coliform. E. coli would be something totally different, but coliform is actually a natural occurring thing within a lot of wells. So the chlorine system is in place. The fire protection is not, and at some point the state's going to want us to do that, and we have actually included that as a project in our state projects for in our Irwin. Just to fill in on the information.
And I'm just trying to remember what the details were. I could call and find out what the details were.
I have all the prints.
I think that there was also a bike lane project to try to get a 3rd lane down Cal City Boulevard, so that we wouldn't have I mean, that was a traffic thing that they were going to do a workaround on. But it was all part of the
I have
same.
the plans and everything that were submitted. 2 engineering firms actually submitted plans for that project.
And it
I have
never went
those.
to never went beyond
No.
receiving of
It
the
was
plans.
mostly fire protection. The lines were all replaced, as you probably know, back when the city took that system over. So it is all a new system. But there was no plans on drilling a well at that time.
No,
That was
well,
not
we
in-
can't. I don't even know if we can. Isn't that the secondary issue? Where is our water rights out there? Do we have the water rights where these people are?
The question is whether there's water underneath where we would drill a well out there, and that's why the recommended solution is to use the existing system rather than risk drilling a well and not finding water. We would have water rights out there. Question
Do
is
we?
whether
Do we? I'm not sure we
it's
do.
part of the basin that we're part of. But at any rate, drilling the well out there would really be unnecessary because we have adequate supply in the city. It's just a matter of delivering it out there, putting it in a tank to maintain the pressure, and then it operates itself from that point on. And so a well out there is-
I would. How far are these people out from Barron?
Well, yeah, where the railroad track crosses Cal City Boulevard, about a quarter of a mile toward the city is where one is located. The other is located just on the other side of the railroad and extends up about a mile. So it's a very large segment property. The other one is
one's Maverick, one's actually at the intersection of Maverick, and the one farther out, around 15th Street is the farthest one out.
I would sit back and say I'm not certain that the city does have water rights in Wonder Acre. Hmm?
We have water rights east of the tracks for sure.
Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, the city purchased the water rights back in 1958 when it was originally around there when it was
It
originally
wasn't part of the
formed.
city.
Yeah, I know that. It's city property, so if it's
But
under the
you
project.
do remember the history. Steve West arranged the annexation, and the reason it didn't work is because we didn't have the water rights in Wonder Acres. We couldn't dig a well out there. That's exactly what happened.
But we could dig a well one block this side. But the
I don't know where it is. I think that was my question. Where is the water rights?
Yeah, water rights, I think, are one, but Nat Mendelsohn purchased the water rights, which is now 90% of Wonder Acres, way back in 1958. What people don't realize, and I argued with Steve West on that point, because you can buy water rights or mineral rights. They're just as saleable as the surface rights. And Steve West.
We should have this
Okay.
on the
Yeah.
microphone if you're gonna allow it.
Yeah, okay. So let's bring back a little bit. Temporary wells at cannabis business locations, sir.
If I could, I don't know what the history is on the water rights there, but typically in a city, we have the right to pass the ordinance that prohibits the drilling of the wells. And also, as we've annexed in this property, we would normally have the right to dig a well somewhere within the city and then bring the water to that location. That's different than, say, I think it's the Mojave Water District. They have a right to, say, deliver the water to certain areas in there, and we can't maybe conflict with their customer base there. That's different than actually digging a well. I don't think their well is there. I think they're probably bringing it up from Mojave, so that
Their well is in Cache Creek.
they're drawing it from somewhere else and delivering it there. So they're two separate issues, going down and getting it and delivery. So that's something that would need to be looked at, but my guess is
It might end the
certainly
whole
have the right
it might
to
end the whole
deliver.
conversation. If we don't have the water rights, then this whole thing isn't something we can discuss. It's kind of an important point. I think that Russell Michaels wanted us to dig a well, and for some reason we didn't do it, did we? The city didn't have the money?
I don't know.
Sir.
Well, again, let me just add to that, we have an ordinance on the books that would be valid that restricts the ability to drill a well without a permit. And that would apply to the city's limits. So people would need to come to us and get that permit. So the question here is somebody owns a piece of property out there and they want to drill a well. We have the right to say yes or no. Now, whether or not they have the rights to drill that well, that's a separate question that it's not us giving them a right in that sense. They either have the ability to do it or they don't. So but we would be granting them a permit to drill. So, I agree that it's good to, we're looking to whether or not where water rights might end or start or end, but this issue of granting a permit, I think we have the right to do.
All right, let's continue the question then. This is three developers are asking for water rights, or the right to drill a well where we may not have the rights to do so. How many other developers that are in your glass ball that might come and ask for the same thing?
Well, it's difficult to tell at this point because I'm not sure where everybody's at, but the city water system, as the closer you get in, it is more readily available and within a reasonable distance to make connection. So if you're half a mile away from the city's water system and you want to develop, and there's sufficient pressure, we expect you to extend the half a mile to get that to your property. And so, but as you get further out in any direction from the center of town, then it becomes less and less likely that the city's water system could service an area. Because we are, as we know, we talk every few meetings about needing to do 5 miles a year of upgrading our water lines. And that needs to continue. And so there are places where we can tap and provide services. There are others where we may have to say it's a little while. In this particular case, along Cal City Boulevard, the city's water pressure drops to, for fire protection, at Barron to essentially nothing. And then you continue to go uphill from there. And so it's a matter of, to be able to service that part of Cal City Boulevard, whether it's Wonder Acres or whatever we call it, is you've got to create a pressure zone that feeds back from that sloping area back into the city. And so you're exactly right. If the system, the $4 to $5 million system was built, it would be built to provide for water to be delivered anywhere along that line, and to start running laterals off of that to extend to additional areas, so it would have that capacity. And so we're not in any way suggesting that either short-term or long-term that the city would go up and drill wells beyond where we already know where we have water. Because we have good wells. They're very productive. The water is good. We would simply extend that at the point where it made good financial sense to extend the water lines up Cal City Boulevard. And the secondary benefit would be that those people in Wonder Acres who chose to leave the Mojave District and connect to us could do so.
Okay.
Yeah, you're on.
Finally. Many questions. One, I think we need to find out, bring this back, but find out where, well, I mean, we can vote on it, but we need to find out where we actually have water rights. I think Mr. Stockwell is good in bringing this forward to us, because what it'll do is it'll allow development, and we really need development to go. And we need these temporary wells, and we need to stress to the people that are building them that they are temporary. But we also need to simultaneously look into our obligation of providing water for Wonder Acres. I guess when we annexed that, we signed up for that, and I guess it's going to be difficult getting permits. I don't know how difficult, but going under the railroad track and pressure the train and everything else, and that's going to be probably, I don't know, but it'll probably be a nightmare for Mr. Platt.
I've actually done that at least a dozen times or more. Just dealing with the railroad is the biggest problem to that.
It's an understatement.
But those things, if we can, like I said, get the approval of these temporary wells, and again, let them know that The wells are temporary, but we need to get that going as soon as possible to get these businesses on track. As I say every meeting, we need at least, before I was saying $15 million generated per year from the cannabis industry by the time Measure C runs out, but now it's probably more closer towards 20. So we need to get these businesses going so we can generate this money so that we can have our police force and our firemen and everything else. So we need to get them going. We need to approve this and get it on going.
And just one big note, there is absolutely no guarantee that there's actually water in these locations, because there are wells out there that do not produce water.
So, Mr. Pott, if I may use my time to
Yes,
ask
ma'am.
Mr. Pott his opinion on this matter.
Well, my job is to protect the city's water supply for the residents of California City, and that's why we're a city, is because we have water. There's no county within the city. It's outside of the city. There's no water master. We are the water master for the water that's in the city. So we have no ability to recharge as an agricultural district would through the state mandated water master. So our job is to protect it for future growth. We are obligated and required by law to track all the water that's pumped out of the city. So we have to stay and maintain jurisdiction over the water. So that's just my only concern.
I've got a couple questions. If we authorize the sinking of wells, even though they're temporary, is there going to be an adverse effect on our system?
They have to be drilled to municipal standards, and that's something that hurdle that's going to, that's why they almost have to stay under the jurisdiction, because they're going to be providing water to public, which would be employees and things, which makes them a water purveyor. So if they stay under the city's purview, we're licensed to do so. Individuals are not. If you drill it for yourself in your house, that's a different story. It's your personal water. That's not the case when you're a business. So as long as we retain that ownership and that right, I agree. At some point, we've got to do something to open up the corridor coming into the city because that is where the growth really needs to be.
Mr. Mayor, go ahead if you have.
Well, what are we looking at cost-wise? Because the one that we approved for Central Park was what, 350,000?
400,000.
400,000?
Yep.
450?
What's going to be required is drilling a well and placing a tank that would meet fire department specs for fire protection, which means just drilling a well doesn't give you pressure. It gives you water. So you have to have a tank, and then off that tank, you have to have a booster system that would basically, like something similar we have up on the hill, that is a pressure vessel that maintains flow at a reasonable pressure, which normally on a system like this would be somewhere between 70 and 95 to 100 pounds. So then you also have to have the fire ability to supply water to the fire department at a flow that would be conducive for the fire department to put out a fire.
Okay, well, my question is, what happens if they go to sink a well and there's nothing?
And then there's nothing.
The well, who's flipping the bill?
They are.
They are?
Yep.
Because I can't see us doing it.
Yeah, and they'll drill, just like ours will. They'll drill a core to make sure that there's water. So you don't just go sink a whole casing out there and hope that there's water in it.
You can't really advocate for the well to be anything but a piece of city property once it's made, can you?
No.
Which means that the maintenance and control of the well and the control of the water supply is going to have to be controlled by the water department, is it not?
You have to monitor water because it is the city's residents' water. It is the city's.
Okay. Doesn't sound like it's going to be very cheap.
It's not a cheap venture. I looked at every possible solution to supply water. The most sensible one for the long term is to direct well 2, which can be done through simple control valves through the SCADA system, so it's automatic, and to supply a pipeline that would produce water for all of that area. Elevation-wise, from the tank site at Westway Station, we own a large chunk of property there. That was the future site for a water tank. I think the goal is I've got prices from tank manufacturers, would be to put a tank there to supply CCC back. But it also, future, could, as you know, that area is the highest elevation in the city, to eventually put a PRV off of that pipeline and supply the industrial area around the airport with higher pressure, which would give it higher fire protection, would be the long-term goal, but also be able to supply water down the whole CCB corridor. So there has some significant good effects of doing that, plus also being able to supply water to Wonder Acres from the city, and then eventually fire protection, because that's what it doesn't have. And Mojave's capacity, and obviously I've talked with Mojave quite a bit, and be over there, they have very limited ability to expand that. It's not too far from where its maximum capacity is, but it's gravity flow. And pressure-wise, you open a hydrant, you have almost no water flow. So at some point, the state has looked at that, and they, you need fire protection. There's businesses out there. That's why I included a project to actually build a tank and a booster station out there, because it has to be boosted, because from Wonder Acres, it's all uphill. And just so you know, the gravity flow back is about 120 PSI at Barron. So if it was a gravity flow line to there, it's 125 PSI, and then supplied by well 2, which we increased the output by almost 200 GPM, would be very well and adequate to supply water to that area. No, adequate.
So we proposed to put in an ag well to water the golf course, correct?
It's not an ag well.
Okay.
I called it that. It was easier to separate it from a municipal water well. It's an irrigation well.
Irrigation well. So it's not municipal. We're not going to use it for drinking water or any other purpose other than to water the golf course. So if we authorize these growers to put in an irrigation well just to handle their crop, they can haul in their drinking water, they can call Sparklets, they can do whatever they want for that kind of water. Can they use that irrigation water for fire suppression?
Yeah, the fire suppression has nothing to do whether it's potable water or not. The problem is they have public, so it still has to meet those guidelines, and that's why, because you couldn't stop somebody from drinking it. So you would have to have 2 totally different separate water systems, and that's not practical to do either. Because they're open, they have public people in there. That's not a private thing where you have just your family there. So it changes the rules a little bit. Even in a golf course, if we were to tie it to the drinking fountains and everything else, they still have to be compliant. That's why we can't tie that to any of the drinking facilities.
Yep. Yes. So what you're saying is then they can't legally put in an irrigation well? Is that what I'm hearing from you?
In a city, they would normally drill a municipal well that would normally be turned over to the city. So they would have to drill it to those specs and protect it, and which we would want, because we want to protect the groundwater, so they would be sealed as per a city well.
Yeah, it's my understanding that these growers or these individuals have put thousands of dollars into their projects, and they're sitting out there waiting for us to make a decision and they're going to decide whether they're going to walk or not and go to another city. So I think our council needs to really look at this hard and see if we want their revenue or whether they walk, because they're at a point where they need this irrigation well until we can supply a line that goes out there that they can hook up to.
That's essentially what they're doing. But for us to take it over at some point and tie it in, and I don't have any idea what their capacity is going to be. Neither do they at this point. It doesn't take a lot of water to fill the tank. It just has to be there for fire protection.
Okay, thank you.
And just one other note, the farther you go towards the mountain, the water is not near as good. There's arsenic issues as you move, and that was one of the problems with some of the Mojave's stuff. So those are all things to
Same to the east, area lake or
the city's lucky. We have some really good water.
okay. Anything else? Anything from the public?
Mayor, Council, Jeannie O'Laughlin, California City. I represent one of the groups that's involved here, Green Desert. They're approximately 1 mile from Barron. They're just east of Gant. So they're the first part of that. Right now, all of these three groups are on California City Boulevard, and each of them is going to have to put in a turn lane, which is going to be in excess of $500,000. So that's $500,000 more that they're spending than every other group that's around here that isn't on a major thoroughfare. So when they were hit with the water issue, that was the tipping point. That was, okay, wait a minute, you want us to put another $1 million into a water line? After we're doing all this other work, they've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on design work so far. They're ready. We're going through our, I think, third revision on our conditions of approval. So they're very close to being able to move forward. They fully expect to be able to be fully up and running in September. And if you'll recall, for cultivation, it doesn't matter if their crop is successful or not. The cultivation tax is based on square foot of canopy. And as soon as they start, you collect the tax. So there's that right off the bat. If you make them put in a municipal well, now we're talking $1 million instead of a few $100,000. This group will most likely leave California City. Enough is enough. So they were fully prepared to go forward with a well, realizing that it's a risk. I mean, they may test and have no water, and then they have that problem to deal with. And so that's why they're coming here to look for a solution. It seems like every time we turn around, there's another obstacle. Craig said something about taking over the well. Remember, these are temporary wells, so our intent was to have an irrigation well. This is just for our plant matter. We will have portable offices and bring in water for drinking, but the intent was never that we would build a well that the city would take over and it would feed into the water system. So if you put that on there, I can't speak for the other groups, they're here as well, but most likely you've just pushed us out of the market. This project here, I will tell you, because I'm working with several different groups, this is a well-funded project. They have a budget. They also have existing facilities up in several different ones in Northern California, so they're very experienced in what they're doing. And, they have a great potential to move forward. So I would really like to ask you to consider allowing them to get a permit for an irrigation well. And then the additional terms here. So what the terms were that each of the three groups would determine what the allocation was based on distance. And then they would start setting aside that money into an interest-bearing account that the city would be able to have financial statements to verify. They would make monthly payments into that account. At the end of 7 years, the money would be there. If sometime before that, let's say 2 years from now, it was ready to go, then they would be asked to put in the rest of their money, and the line would be built. If nothing ever happened, if only one group got going or only two groups got going, that would be a pretty extensive cost for them to bear. So, you know, that would be something the city would have to decide if they were moving forward or not. If there's 7 more groups that come up along CCB or in that area that could share, then that would be great as well. Then we can split the cost over that. But this is a huge investment for all of these groups. And they want to stay here. They've made the commitment. They've invested hundreds of thousands of dollars already. And it's just like one more hurdle that's been thrown out there. So I would ask you to please consider allowing the irrigation well permits for these cannabis industries. Thank you.
Let me just clarify. When I said municipal, they need to be sealed because when you drill into your water supply at 600 to 800 feet, which is what our water is, there's nothing temporary about a hole that taps your water supply. So it's very important that the city has the ability to monitor and also monitor the water. I'm not suggesting they go drill a 16-inch casing, which is what most of our wells are, and an 8-inch column to pump that water. That's not what I was suggesting. I realize these will probably be a lot smaller wells that the city won't take over from the standpoint of pumping water into our system. It's the fact that we retain that ownership and right at some point in time.
It's a water right thing, correct? Okay.
Mr. Mayor, if I could as well. Currently, the way the code's written, it has to be dedicated to the city. So that's the current rule. This idea of an irrigation well, it's I suppose possible. We probably have to amend the code, so we need direction from you in that regard to say, create this opportunity with a permit to do this sort of thing if you were going to do it, and we'd have to specify what the standards are. It sounds like the idea would be that they would abandon that well once the line comes through. Normally when somebody builds a development and it's out from the city's system, normally what happens is they pay to extend that, and then if people join along the way, they can get, say, reimbursed over, say, a 10-year period or some set period. We do an improvement agreement where they get money back as people add along that line. I don't know if they're willing to do that. It sounds like they're not, but one alternative would be to allow them to do this, but maybe as a condition of doing it because it's temporary is to maybe every year pay in a certain amount that gradually will build up the money that a portion of the money to build the line out there. But ultimately it's the people's development that are supposed to pay for these extensions, not the current ratepayers. And I think other people in the audience would agree with that. So if we can come up with a way that would allow them to do it, and then but set aside funds, say, every year, gradually over 10 years maybe, we build up enough money along with maybe some other projects to get that line, 70% funded, and then the city funds portion of it at some point. But at that point, then they'd have to terminate the wells and join into the system. That's just it's an idea, but again, it'd have to be according to whatever the standards that are set, and you have to clearly state they'd have to abandon those wells at that point. Just throwing out some ideas to have them ultimately pay for it, but maybe not up front.
Christy Mondigan. June of 2016. We're coming up on 3 years now that this opportunity came to our town. And I agree with Ms. O'Laughlin. If we don't do something to help these businesses get started, they are going to go someplace else. And this sounds like a good idea that is just something to hold us over until all of it starts rolling in, Get these businesses up and started, up and running, get the revenue in, because if we don't get these businesses up and running and the revenue coming in, as they've said earlier this evening, no one's going to vote for that property tax again. So I think this is something we should look into. I know there's a lot of I's to dot and T's to cross to make sure it's done right, but it's definitely something that we need to help these businesses get started. Thank you.
Good evening, Rick Warren, 8612 Jimson Avenue. Now, there's two things to look at here. One, you can use the wells that are drilled and do a reverse flow where you can start gravity building outwards from that well. Instead of trying to go this way from the city to the well, start developing small communities around that one water well serviced like a CSD that they have in Tehachapi and other areas. So this could actually promote other developments because it'll be a city-owned well that they drill. And then you can start running lines from there to make other developments in that area. Also, I would not limit it to these three locations because there's a lot of building north of us on Aurelia. And there are some areas out there that used to have wells. They haven't been used in a while, so they're dormant, so the wells are there. So just looking at it from the two perspectives, you can make growth out of this and meter the water to the people and get money incoming to actually help expand the lines to build more in that area. So what really should be proposed to is to think about the distance of a water line and what is your minimum distance before you'll permit a well to be drilled that the city owns and will meter you to use it. That's what I'm saying. Don't just limit it to these three areas because you could have it out towards Silver Saddle. You could have it in other areas of this city, not just on the boulevard. So think bigger than 3 wells. Think how those 3 wells could be manipulated and used to grow more other properties around there. Develop housing, shopping centers, many other things. But you're going to have to decipher a distance. Is it a half a mile? Is it 1 mile? Is it a quarter mile before you incorporate that into it? Of course, you're going to meter out you're going to have to do a study to see how deep these wells are. Some of the areas out towards Wonder Acres are 400 to 500 feet. I've had a few cells where they had to go out there and measure the distance, and then you're going to find a good well driller that can actually tell you where to drill the well. All right, that's just a suggestion. It's a tough one that you guys are up against here, but look at how you can use this to help grow the city, not just 3 businesses. How it can actually be expanded like a spider web out and grow more lines and make more property developable. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Mayor, Council, Ron Smith. When the Central Park well was presented, I stood here and I asked the question, is this going to open the floodgates for other wells? And I was told no. It seems that there was more discussion over more meetings on the Central Park well than there's going to be over these temporary wells. As Mr. Stockwell said, typically what starts as temporary doesn't stay temporary. We have seen incrementalism. I've used it before. We've seen it before our eyes. If I own 20 acres in Second City, if developers on the west side of town get to dig a well, there's no water out there, would I have the same right if I have the money to dig a well, a temporary well, until water is brought out there? We're already hearing this is going to be much more than 3. Mr. Platt has said that water is a precious commodity, and as a citizen who's not at all excited about what has been said from the last almost 3 years ago, with folks coming into town, they have tens of millions of dollars. There is absolutely nothing that they won't do and do it that quick. And doing what needs to be done for roads, it needs to be done for water. It's kind of amazing. We were promised a bunch that hasn't been carried through. Question I have, will the city have any expenses connected with any of these wells at all? And if the city's going to have expenses, how much will it be? Will water rates be different for them? But what is going to be the obligation? I'm a taxpayer. I am opposed to good working families leaving this community, which have left, and I know of 4. That's not a naysayer statement. That's just a factual statement that left because they don't want to be in a community that's known for the cannabis train and nothing else. So, will water rates be changed? Are they going to get pay less for their water than working families or other citizens pay for theirs? What are going to be the actual expenses? And last meeting, Mr. Mayor, you allowed for answers to be given to questions by another citizen that they didn't have to wait for. I think it's legitimate questions that is part of this conversation. Is the city going to have any expenses connected with any of these wells, and if so, how much? I think it's a legitimate question.
Can anybody answer that?
If you were to authorize something like this, you would condition it on them paying all the costs of building it and maintaining it until it ties into the system, at which point it would become part of the
And when the
system.
city takes it over, is there then going to be a cost
So
at that point?
you would have to, as part of your fee study, establish what it costs and charge them for that. It would be, just like with anything else, you charge exactly what it costs to maintain that system, and they'd have to bear 100% of that cost. Just like the ratepayers are supposed to bear the cost of our current system, and not more than that, or not less than that.
Thank you, sir.
Welcome, sir.
David Stafford, 9200 Greenwood. I've been here for 30-something years. This city, you go, I don't care what city you go into, Mr. Platt, Mr. Stockwell, any of them. You go in, you say, okay, we've got a company or we've got companies that's going to be coming in here, and they're going to bring a $20 million revenue over this certain amount of time once it gets started, and it's going to work. 90% of the cities roll out the map and say, what can we do to help you get started? Not that case here. Here in this city, what we've done is how much can we force you to pay? That's the road we've headed down. We've been going down it for 3 years, and I don't see it changing. This ideal of the wells, drilling the wells to get their property started, that's something that needs to be done. Another thing, these are agricultural crops. This shouldn't be on a treated water system. The city should get paid for every gallon of water that comes out of it. But let's make it at a rate, because it's not there for it, doesn't have all the chemicals and stuff in it. It's just for growing plants. Let's make the businesses, I'll pay it. I've got 160 acres out here. We'll pay for the fresh water that has to go to the bathrooms, the drinking fountain, stuff like that. But I'd give anything to have a well that we could put in ourselves to irrigate our crops and not pay the stage 5 deal going up on the water rates. Because I guarantee you, electricity is going to be cheap at the route, at the rate that stuff's going. This 20 million or 40 million, whatever you all was expecting to get out of this thing, I see it going by the way of the dodo bird. It's leaving. And it's happening here more and more. 1 month ago, I told you guys, it's coming in. It's going to be legal across the United States. And if we don't get started, we're not going to get there. We can't make it more expensive for any business to come to our town and work than to go someplace else. They'll go someplace else. These companies that has proposed this to you now has spent hundreds of thousands of dollars getting this stuff set up. It's not a drop in the park or the so-called millions that will take care of everything that everybody dreamed it was coming in. No businesses has done that way in no towns. If we had an airplane company coming out here wanting to expand our airport and all that stuff, I guarantee you, for the tax base that would be here with it, this city better figure out a way to wash their feet to get them here. Instead of trying to grind it out of them every nickel and dime and penny. They've got to make a living, every one of them. So I'd really ask you to consider this on a basis that's fair for all and it works for everybody.
Hey, Dave. Dave?
Yes, sir.
How's your mouth?
Very sore. Mr. Nick knows. He done a good job. He yanked it out, so it worked.
Okay.
But no, this kind of stuff, We're a city. We've got to pull together as a city and make it happen. If we don't, we're going to lose the last opportunity I see coming this way for a long, long time.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Raj Million. I consult for Atil Farms and sometimes K2. Many more developers will benefit from this, not just the three that's that's talking up here. We need to amend the code to allow this. We can specify the standards. We need an irrigation well, or maybe even an agricultural well, but we don't need a municipal well. It can't have chlorine in the water. It will kill the plants. Developers in the city would have a development agreement in place before they would start drilling a well. So everything would be understood. There wouldn't be anything left that a lawyer or professionals wouldn't cover. So many developers have left because of no water availability to their properties. The city does not have the current capability to supply the necessary water to these properties. That's why we're proposing this. The city does not have a current ordinance to have irrigation wells drilled. We're asking for an irrigation well, not a municipal well, even an agricultural well. So it's a good idea that makes good financial sense to the city. It has no adverse effect. The developer would build the well to the city standards and make sure the city can monitor it if need be. But it is not going to be feeding citizens of the city, because this would be specifically for that project. What we're asking for is a permit to drill a temporary agricultural or a irrigation well until the $5 million city water line is put in place. The temporary well would then be disconnected once the city line is in place. Immediate water revenue would be coming into the city from the meter that will be placed on these wells. The developer is taking all the risk and using their own funds to drill the well. The city is not spending anything. The developer would drill a well, install a pump, install a tank, and make sure it meets the fire department standards for fire protection. So the city has nothing but to lose and everything to gain from the immediate funds that would be coming from these wells that are metered. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else?
I've known them for years. They're great guys. They're trying hard to bring a project to the city. They've been in their planning stages for almost 2 years. Without saying anything derogatory, they've been in the planning department for those 2 years. Change this, change that. I didn't say that. This is what I meant. Yes, we talked about a well. Yes, we talked about water tanks. Yes, all of this stuff over 2 years. They have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars in engineering just trying to bring this project online. If the city sees the benefit of an irrigation well to the golf course, why can't it see the benefit of irrigation wells to Atil Farms and Green Garden? Green Desert? They're badly needed. If you go out in this desert, you can see all these wells that are sealed. That's because years and years and years ago, we were miles of alfalfa. They had to get their water somewhere. And a lot of those wells, that's what they were used for. So one crop is okay, but one crop isn't. One crop, if we want to grow hemp, that's fine. But if we want to grow pot, it's a different story. You guys, I'm asking you to please consider all that these men have been through, and now are at the point where they can go, and because of what we've heard in the city, we can't go further, and every bit of money that they've spent's going out the window. I'm afraid you're going to ask for something that you're not going to like if that's what's going to happen. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am.
Good evening again, Sal Hudson. Allowing these wells is a giant step forward. We need to show the investors and developers that we will dazzle them with the brilliance of passing this ordinance, not baffle them with the BS and putting obstructions in their way. A good example, well, that's the wrong term. These guys want to put meters on the wells and pay water rates. That's revenue coming into the city. It makes perfect sense. The cost to the city is zero, nothing. No money whatsoever. It's all coming out of the developer investors' pockets. That is as opposed to the irrigation well at the golf course. It's costing we taxpayers $450,000 with zero return on it. So we're supporting something that's costing us money and trying to reject or restrict something that will generate us money. Something is wrong with that picture. So we need to develop it and give these guys the green light and say, what else can we do to help you get started, and how soon will you be up and running, and give us an estimate of your revenue. That's what we ought to be doing, because there's just been too much obstructionism over the last 3 years. We've opposed it, but yet there's been a red light stop. We got to amend this to make it more inconvenient, and that is the historical, the history on this. We've issued 200 permits, and we're down to just a handful of developers now. If you want to see the rest of them go, put more restrictions on them. They'll pack up and go. That's guaranteed. And some people will be happy, but the rest of us will be paying for it through higher taxes. And if they're concerned about the amount of water that's being used, we don't need to worry about that, because remember that company Aqua Helio, they did a survey and they said that there's 900 years of water in the aquifer. I did an experiment. Somebody here saw it on hydroponics, testing to see how much water each plant uses. It uses about 3 gallons of water every 10 days. That's nothing. So we don't have the concern about water usage. And to
Mayor, please.
Affirm. Thank you.
And to affirm what Raj just said, the chlorine will kill plants if you try to put that restriction on them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for staying with not saying the word, but just using the initials. Anybody else?
They need temporary wells to continue their business. There's going to be others. I don't know how we give them a permit, but if you give them a permit, it's no guarantee the water's there. I'll bet you money there's water there. There's water up on Fremont Valley in a well. A doctor drilled a well. It was $25,000. That's how long ago it was. It's still working. So there's water there. And I agree with Mr. Pratt. The casing needs to be supervised. And no well driller is going to put a casing down in a well. I don't care whether you're watering cannabis or feeding cattle. That is going to cause a problem for our water system. He has a license to worry about too. So give these guys a temporary well permit, will you? So we can get some business in this town. Thank you.
Anybody else? If not, bringing it back up here. What's your pleasure?
I think we should do it. I think we need to look into all the necessary agreements as our council has told us and as our city manager talked about, and Dr. Laughlin, other people, everybody out here, Raj, and we need to come to an agreement where we get some type of irrigation well, make it as Mr. Platt said, it doesn't have to be the same as a city well, but make it and have it, we need to get together, tell them, give them direction, because this is discuss and decide whether to direct staff to prepare the necessary agreements. So we need to do that, direct staff to prepare the necessary agreements with these people for a win-win for everybody, and proceed as soon as we can. So if it's appropriate at this time, I'd like to make a motion that the council direct staff to prepare necessary agreements to allow temporary water systems.
Probably will include an ordinance too.
Yeah, and also change the ordinance if we have to, but all the necessary things to get this going so that we can generate revenue. As I keep mentioning, and I'll mention it again, 5 years from now, I don't think that Measure D will pass, and we need to be generating about $20 million for our safety, for our police and fire and everything else. So we need to get that going, and I haven't forgot about my promise to the chief of 40 policemen, so that's still one of my goals. So
Get clarity on, assuming this passes here, that the intent here is to allow this as a temporary
Correct.
well, that the ultimate goal would be that when a city line comes within a certain distance, that they would be required to then hook up within, say, a certain period. We'll have to figure that out, but that's the intent, and to abandon the well at that point.
Yes. Once they hook up to the line, they have to abandon the well.
And
But
then
as we
also
said-
they would be paying for the entire cost of the installation of the well and or any related city monitoring of that system, or all those sorts of things. So we would include all that.
Yes.
Yes, but as we talked, we need to get this going, and if they have to set aside an interest-bearing account on the side to eventually pay for that, all of the things that we talked about tonight, you can meet whoever's going to meet with them, but get this going, because again, we can't afford to lose anybody else. We need all the money that we can collect.
A long motion you made.
That's not all in the motion, but you understand. Or we could make it that long, but my motion again is simply to direct staff to prepare necessary agreements and bring back to council for approval to change the ordinance and allow temporary water wells as discussed tonight.
For a second?
I second.
Can we have discussion now?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. There's a couple items that you don't address in your motion that I think are going to be important considerations that the policy is going to have to reflect on. First, I'm just almost certain that land that was outside of the city prior to the annexation of, what year was that? 94? 92? If that was county land, there is no way on this earth the city has water rights under county land. It's not there. Did we buy it? We've not been told that we bought the rights, and I doubt seriously we hold those rights. I do believe that Mojave has restricted our access to wells in Wonder Acres, and that is a water rights issue. I think we need to find it out. You can go find it out. That's important.
Can I just speak real briefly to that? If we're issuing a permit, it would be conditioned on them bearing all that, having the right. So if there's an issue of them having the right to the water,
We're saying we have the right to the water. That's why they're applying for a well, because we have the right to the water now.
We're issuing them a permit to drill a well. If there's an issue with them not having the right to access that water underneath for some reason, whether that's Mojave or some other reason, like they sold off their water rights, then that's on them.
All right.
And that person who owns those rights can sue
It will be
them.
on them, but I have a feeling that there's, outside of the annexation, there may not be water rights. The reason California City exists is because of the ag that went on here and the inadequacy of the water supply to support the ag industry that was here. The water levels dropped, it got too expensive to pump it out of the ground. That's why Cal City was designed and converted from ag land to a developed community. We need to be aware that ag does not become a significant percentage of the water supply usage in California City. So at some point in time, we may do this initially, but we have to have the tools in place to limit ag use of the water supply. And I don't know how to do that. That's not part of this discussion, but I think it's important that we make that finding, and that has to be subsequent policy.
It's already part of the plan that was just passed, and the Aqua Helio was self-sufficient for serving themselves. There is not that amount of water available in the basin, and the basin was seriously overdrafted through the 1950s. It has recovered in a lot of it, but it's still on a decline. So we have water, and the safe yield has been leveled in that, which would be further down the years would really define that. But there is massive subsidence as you go north because of the overdrafting of the basin. Not in the city, but it was overdrafted, so you're right.
You could on the permits that you issued, you could put limitations on there in terms of maximum.
I'm just saying that part of this is a policy that we're establishing. I don't have a problem with creating using the ag, creating the ag well potential, but I'm also saying there's going to come a moment where, no, we can't have thousands of them all over town. No. So I don't know what that number is, but it's a planning issue and an impact issue to our water supply.
I would never support that, just so you know.
Which?
Well, we just
thousands?
Yes,
I know that.
We just want to make sure that the city is covered.
But that has to be addressed.
That has, yes.
And that's all I'm trying to say is that we can make the motion to move forward, but if we don't keep these in mind as part of the policy issue, then I think we're going to have some serious trouble.
You weren't on the council when we had asked Mr. Platt, do we have enough water for the cannabis industry? And he looked at a lot of the people, because we had 200 applicants, and at that time he said that we had enough water for, if the 200 people who had applied, we had enough water for them.
Original, I forget, 25 or 15 or whatever, I said, yeah, it's not an issue and a problem. If they actually put 200 in, we need to have some further discussions. We would have to drop some other wells. We don't have capacity to feed that, but I've always said that I would suspect we'll end up with somewhere around 25 facilities, and that's not an issue.
That's what everybody's talked about.
Yeah, then, just with those things in mind, then I would move forward.
Good. Ma'am? Did, Madam Clerk, did you basically get the?
Yeah, sure.
And you got who made the motion? And,
Yes.
Okay.
Duncan Johnson.
Yeah, we're going to do a roll call vote on this, because I think, a couple things were made. One thing that statements made tonight, when Councilman Lucinovich talked about when we annexed aerial acres, or Wonder Acres, excuse me, that would have been a long annexation. They were promised water. They were promised services, and it still hasn't occurred yet. That's a problem. I think this will be a benefit The biggest benefit, I don't know. Is it going to be a benefit to the city? I think it is. I think it'll help us be able to expand and improve. And we need that. So, yeah, absolutely, I've said what I got to said. Madam Clerk, can we have roll call vote?
Councilmember Johnson?
Yes.
Lisenovich?
Yes, with trepidations.
Paris?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Stump?
Yes.
Mayor McGuire?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Okay. All right, going to MB4. MB4 is the executive employees compensation. Mr. Stockwell.
Members of council, unlike the rank and file employees of the city, the executives are not represented by a bargaining unit. And so setting salaries falls upon the city council and myself to do that. And so as brought up at the last council meeting where we approved the labor contract with the police union, Councilman Paris pointed out that he felt like police chiefs should get the same kind of increase that the officers receive. So based upon that, we've done an analysis, the similar analysis that we did when we started negotiations with the bargaining units. So the graph that has been, that is attached, shows by using the same jurisdictions that we use to analyze our relative position on our miscellaneous fire and police employees, what the distribution of doing the same analysis for the department heads, the executives of the city, because we have the same issue in filling those positions and recruiting as we do with others. And so based upon that spreadsheet, we can see the relative position of where we are as being competitive with the communities that are most similar to us in the region that we are in. We did not compare Bakersfield for obvious reasons, and certainly not Mojave, not Lancaster and Palmdale, and so it should give us a fair analysis of where we stand and a consideration that we should be doing in adjusting compensation for those department directors. And so with that, rather than go through the very long explanation there, I'm recommending that the council authorize adjust the executives at the average levels that are identified for each of those in the organization. This does not affect the city manager. City council sets the manager's salary through the agreement that's in place. And so this would affect the executive or the positions that are identified. City clerk, community development director, finance director, fire chief, HR director, police chief, and public works director.
Thank you, sir. Do you have any comment we're going to discuss, and then we'll kick it out?
I don't have any questions at this time.
I have a lot, but probably kick it out and then let it come back up.
Public first? Okay. Public, come on down. If you have any questions in reference to MB4, please come forward.
Catherine Efford, California City, Efford Realty, Vice President from the developer of this great city for many years. And I was compensated for my labors, and I was compensated well. It was nothing for me to work 16 or 18 hours a day, because I knew if I didn't, at the end of the month, I wouldn't have the money for the next month that I was getting at that time. People work in accordance with their reward. If you doubt that, get a puppy dog, and they will roll over for a piece of crumb that's as small as a small fingernail. Give a salesman a gold pen, and he'll sell 6 lots. Tell him, well, you're going to get a little bit more commission. I'd rather have the gold pen. I know. I used to run a sales force for California City Development, Great Western Cities Real Estate, Do you have any idea how many salespeople we ran? In my office alone, I had 106. And when I wanted those salespeople to get out and work, I would put up a gold pen and a 1% bonus. I would put up a car and a 2% bonus. We would write $1 million a weekend, sometimes two, right out of that little sales office down there that's now called Coldwell Banker on a weekend. You cannot expect people to do a good job, and that's the whole purpose of what I'm telling you, and not pay them. I have no idea what the salaries are because I didn't look. I could have, because you know it's public knowledge. But whatever they were, our police chief works harder for what he's paid, whatever it is, than any other police chief we've ever had. We've got an HR person that beats, anything in town. We need to pay him, guys. That's all I can tell you. They'll do more for us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Anybody else?
Jeannie O'Laughlin, California City. I agree that we need to really look at salaries. I think we also need to look at job descriptions. I think if we're going to pay more, then we should expect more as well. We should look at education, experience, but in order to attract top quality people, you have to pay them. My only other comment is when I was looking at this, I actually went to Transparent California, and these numbers aren't what's on Transparent California. The actual numbers are much higher, and the only reason I went and looked is when I was here, I knew some of these people made a lot more money than was on here. So I'm a little concerned about the accuracy of these numbers.
So, okay, I'm sorry.
The Transparent California one that I used was the 2018, was all that was available at the time that I looked at it, which was a week ago. It's what I found as I went on the site. And as pointed out, in some places we don't have a comparable position, and so we have to extrapolate which one it is.
You want?
I pointed out, when the last time, based upon the ones I saw in Transparent California, those cities that will be reporting sometime later this month is when they will update Transparent California, have all done 4 to 6% increases. And so these, if anything, these understate the difference.
I passed out to the council members up here, and Transparent California only has 2016 for California City. It only goes up to 2016. I have the cities and there were asterisks by the two cities, McFarland and another one that only had 2016. But ours, if you look on the package that we received from the council, says it's 2017. There is no 2017 or 18 for California City. And all of those cities that we referenced on there, Arvin, Ridgecrest, Tehachapi, Delano, Taft, and Shafter, I have the thing. So we disagree. I mean, I think that our people deserve raises, but the facts that we were given are grossly incorrect. And additionally, I looked at our payroll that we had, and I came up with the salaries off our payroll because we were getting that up until recently, but Mr. Ibanez will start giving that to us again. But looking at the payroll and everything, and those numbers are grossly different than what's on NB4. So what I would like to suggest is that the city go back and do their homework on this and get us accurate amounts so that then we can make an assessment, because you guys work hard, all of you work hard for what you do, and we need to make an accurate assessment of compensation for you.
Anything else?
I have to look at this and say this is informational piece for me. I still have, I don't know that, I haven't received the impact of the union raises and the new MOUs. I haven't seen the impact of that on our budget. So truly, this is something that's informational going into the budget process. And I you know, yeah, I think we're probably playing a little low on our critical leadership positions. But I'd sit back and say this isn't the time to think about authorizing raises. So I'd sit back and say this is fodder for the budget process. But I still don't know to this day what the impact of the new contracts are to the budget itself. So I think we have some other things that are more pressing for us.
I am on board with what Councilman Lisenovich is saying. We just spent a full day going over budget and the things that need to change and having the right numbers. And as we approach the end of the fiscal year and we're deciding on a new budget, that might be a more appropriate time for this.
Sir?
As I said, I'd like to pull it and bring it up another time.
Anybody from the public? We're going to come back.
Mr. Mayor, Council, I just like to, earlier this evening, the special public safety tax is referred to as a property tax. And many in the community, some were not, but many in the community were excited that our public safety received raises. Many were very excited with that, made the news. If we don't have the money, we can't spend it. This was a public safety tax. And henceforth, the excitement was for the police and fire having their salaries increased. And I would encourage you to be thinking down the road. We were told of the great tax base we're going to have. Let's face it, we're not seeing anywhere close to what was projected. So whatever council is going to be sitting here down the road is going to be coming back for another. And it will probably be a public safety tax, and people will be fearful. And then all the extra money is going to be spent on other stuff. But remember, this is public safety. And just because people pay for public safety does not mean that the floodgate should open for spending all that we have. There needs to be some serious saving for the dearth that's going to come. For the 7 lean cattle, there's going to be a dearth upon this land. So I would encourage you to really ponder that seriously. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there anybody else that needs to come up and approach? Then let's bring it up here. Looking for a motion.
As I said, I would like to pull it. I make a motion to pull NB4.
And bring it back when?
Bring it back when the staff can do more work on it, and also when we are, as Councilman Lisenovich said, when we are more aware of what our budget will be. I think they work hard, and I think they deserve a raise. I mean, they work hard, and I've looked at how our salaries are to other cities and similar sized cities. But at this time, we need to pull it and do more research on it.
For a second?
A second.
Okay, since we're...
Mayor?
Yes, sir.
We discuss it?
Yes, sir.
I need to know what it is you want me to research, because the salaries listed for Cal City for the department heads come exactly from what it costs us. These are what we pay.
I will give this to Mr. Ibanez, and I went and did some research on it, so I have salaries, and what I have here is more accurate, so we can talk later.
I think what the indication is that this is still to be part of the budget process. I don't think we have to. I mean, this is. I mean, how far away is the budget going to be as far as a discussion item?
It has to be
4 weeks?
Has to be adopted by the end of June, and so we've got to start working on it very soon.
So we're there.
So it sounds like we're going to come back to it pretty quickly.
So there's a motion on there to table and until
I'd say to the budget.
until
Mayor,
budget time.
I apologize to department heads, because the city's practice in the past would have been that they would have gotten the same as the miscellaneous employees. But because of my error, now they're not going to get anything. And so I apologize to them for bringing this up and separating it, because they would have at least gotten the increase that the miscellaneous employees got. So I apologize, guys. Sorry.
Bring it back in 2 weeks?
No, budget.
Well, the reason I'm saying in 2 weeks, what I can get with Mr. Ibanez and show him what I have here, they can formulate, and then we know how much this part of the budget will be. Otherwise, we don't know what.
No, we don't know anything about the budget.
We know the raises that we gave the employees.
You don't know anything about the raises yet. You don't know. You have not gotten one piece of information about it, about its impact on the budget. This needs to be part of the budget discussion, and that's a month away. It's a month. We don't have to continue this before that.
I'm with Councilmember Lisenovich. They do deserve raises, absolutely, and I'm all on board with raises, but we need to know where we're standing fiscally, because we have a fiduciary responsibility to the public to not overspend and not put ourselves in any kind of position where we were this past year. I don't want to have to face that again. The budget is just a few short weeks away, and when we talk about when we talk about the budget in general, this will come up, and it will be part of that discussion. And I think that's fair. No one's saying we don't want to give them raises. We just want to be fiscally responsible and make sure that as we go into the new budget that we're taking this into consideration.
I think on personnel, the cost, and I will wait. I will go along with you, but I just want to point out that personnel costs, we already know what we agreed in the agreement with the unions. So that amount, you can easily put that in Excel and tell you what your personnel costs are going to be. I think that additionally, what we need to do is look at the directors, and we need to put their amounts that we will possibly give them, that needs to be included, so that when we are coming up with a budget, we already know what the rank and file will get, but we also need to know what the directors will be getting. And that is an important part of the budget as well. But I will agree with you and go for 1 month.
I have a question, Mr. Mayor.
Sir.
We have a 2019-2020 salary schedule that the city has put out. Is that available to council?
Our contract hasn't been authorized, so it needs to be plugged in. And so it's partially correct, partially incorrect.
Thank you.
And Councilman Paris, what I did, if you look on the sheet that I passed to you, I took the actual payroll numbers for several payrolls, and that's where I came up with the amounts.
Okay, let's, since there was a motion put on for a month, and it was put on by Mayor Pro Tem Stump, and second by Councilman Lisenovich. Let's do a roll call, please.
Councilmember Johnson?
Yes.
Lisenovich? Paris?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Stump?
Yes.
Mayor McGuire?
Yes. I think it'll just be safer all the way around. I want to make sure our 6 is covered. And I apologize to all the department heads. I want to make sure that that we're good, and we're not putting a strain on everybody's pocket or on ourselves. All right. Going to public business from the floor. This portion of the meeting is reserved for persons desiring to address the City Council on any matter not on this agenda and over which the City Council has jurisdiction. Please state your name for the record, and please limit your time to 3 minutes.
Good evening, Al Hudson. My first item is that there is absolutely no excuse that all meetings be broadcast, because there's people at home that are homebound and such that cannot participate in the, as an example, in workshops and such, and they should have access to that. And it's only through broadcasting that they do, and it should not be restricted. No excuse. That's part of being transparency. Second item is, this is for Councilman Lisenovich. You wanted to know about keeping up with the monthly financial activities and events. There's a tool that you can order the city manager to comply to produce, and that's what's called an MD&A. That's a management discussion and analysis. You can have that on a monthly basis and be able to keep abreast of everything that's going on. The third thing is there seems to be our communications are not distributed in a timely manner or at all. And that is restricting our First and 14th Amendment rights. That really needs to be taken into very strong consideration. It's on a regular basis. The next thing is the Chamber of Commerce gives awards, financial awards and assistance to deserving students going into college. And I think that those, the financial assistance they give is about $500. With the $15,000 increase that they have in their, that the city's given them, they should double that amount of money to the needy students that are going into college that apply for financial assistance. And the last thing is, I think that we need to have a type of civil service examination for all positions, and that is based on on the person's abilities, not their connections as it is now. And those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Jeannie O'Laughlin, California City. Just an observation. So I'm hearing different events that are going on. So on April 27th, we've got Tortoise Days. We're going to have the public hearing for the dispensary and the delivery. And we've got cleanup and trash shredding all on the same day. So maybe the city could develop some kind of master calendar or something and maybe spread these dates out a little bit. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm glad I was not the only one thinking about that. I'm going, you know.
It's a very good idea. How are you, Mr. Mayor? Mariah Dotson, Community Advocate. I believe you guys received the correspondence from mycalcity.org, which is just a synopsis of the recommendations brought forth by the committee, Mr. Mayor?
But the
Okay.
workshop, yes.
During the workshop. So there was a one-page summary submitted, I believe, yesterday, just of those recommendations that were summarized. Mr. Mayor, you stated earlier that California City is not what it used to be, and I think many of us are in 100% agreement that it is evolving right now. So, as a community advocate, we are in support of the recommendations brought forth for the fast track of the permit processing. As a forward-thinking community leaders, I would ask you, what does successful California City look like? If you were just to close your eyes and really envision. And then what can you as leaders do to help us create that city? Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Anybody else? From
Mr. Mayor, Council, this has been Ron Smith has been really a drag of a night for probably everybody that's here, and it's certainly not a happy night. I would encourage the decisions that anybody's going to make tonight would be based not upon personality. If there's going to be any decisions, I didn't get a memo that the sky had fallen tonight. But I would encourage you to make your decisions based upon fact. Decisions that are made tonight based in the community. Mr. Platt, very thankful that he defended, as a citizen, defended my water rights and defended the fact that we have a limited amount of water. History repeats itself. I'm told hydroponics, not much water. Asked someone else who's in the field, wasn't sure if those are the numbers were right, but we need to operate according to fact. Fact is, as a pastor in this town, I want to see houses built. I want to see individuals move here. We have kind of forgotten the fact that we were a bedroom community of California, of Edwards Air Force Base, and we can be again. And something's got to be done to spur building. Something has to be done. And I would encourage you not to be angry at those that want to spur. Even if there's only one train, trains do have spurs, do they not? And if there's only one train in town, let's get some spurs going and get some building. I'm just looking over at Musa. Not that I'm getting free advertising, but he could give me another free shirt, because what I'm going to say, he sold a number of homes. Sold a couple today. And there are people moving out, a number from our church, but there are people moving into this community. And I think it'd be kind of interesting to get some stats as far as how many houses in the course of between meetings have been bought and sold. Give us some encouraging news. We live in a great town, and we get slammed on a regular basis. I hope nobody buys USA Today. I used to buy it every day. I don't even go to it anymore online. If you have it, I would encourage you to use it for catching paint scraps. But we live in a great community. It was exciting tonight. A new firefighter, 2 new police officers. That's exciting, is it not? And so I'll leave you with that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Christy Munn again. What my vision for California City is? Real simple. I want a grocery store. So I don't have to drive 40 miles to go to Lancaster and do major grocery shopping every 3 weeks. And as for the analysis of a train and spurts, right now we have one train coming into town, and it's the cannabis industry. And those will bring other industries here and bring more people here. And I do want to see California City grow. I'd love to see California City Boulevard to the west, or that way's west, being a cannabis thoroughfare. One business after another that is cannabis industry. That can be our industrial area, that and the airport. And I want, like I said, a grocery store. Something else other than McDonald's. Whatever happened to Alberto's? Are they ever finishing up?
That's still going on?
No, let's keep our fingers crossed. But yeah, we definitely want to see our city move forward. And I want to be positive about it that, I'm going to say, I've been saying this for almost 3 years now. Keep moving forward. And, you know, I love living here. I came from San Diego. There was just too many people there. And there are going to be a lot of people that are upset with the change. but then there's going to be a lot of people that come that are going to enjoy our city. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Yes, sir.
Raj Million. There are going to be people who leave the city that might not like what's going on, but there are going to be people who come into the city because of what is going on. People like me who do come to this city because of this. People who open up businesses, people who make a difference in the community. And these are the type of people it will also attract, and it will make this community grow. We will have newer homes, maybe even tiny homes. We'll have communities developing. And people like me are the people who need to come in, develop the city, and it's a good thing for the city. So.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else? Nobody else, then do we now, well, the city attorney took leg bell. Yeah, we're going to do the council agenda and then go back into closed session. Okay. This portion of the meeting, oh, by the way, thank you all so very much for being here for tonight. It is, it's been a tough road a little bit, and I just want to thank everybody for their kindness and support and being polite and following the rules. So thank you so all of you very, very much. Council agenda. This portion of the meeting is reserved for council members to present information, announcements, and items that have come to their attention. The Brown Act precludes council, staff, or public discussion. Short staff responses are appropriate. The council will take no formal action. The council member may request the city clerk to calendar an item for consideration at a future meeting or refer an item to staff. We're gonna run this way. You're on the stick first. You're on first. Anything, council agenda. Council agenda.
I'm amazed at the turnout tonight. I'm amazed at the number of people who hung in there for the entirety of this meeting. I appreciate it more than you can know. We all do. We appreciate seeing, whether you're on one side or another, people getting involved in the community is very important. And this is a dream. You know, we want to see as many people here as possible and hear as many things as possible. We can be educated. We can certainly learn things from what you come up and tell us. Unfortunately, right now, there is a huge divide in the community, and it makes us look ugly. Our ability to get along, to be civil, to be human to each other, it's so important in a community, in a family. We are a family, as indicated before. And I would just like to see less of that, less of the division and more of the community. That's it. I love this town and I love the people here, and I'm so appreciative for everyone here tonight. So thank you.
Thank you. Sir?
I think that our meetings have been more civil in this council that's up here. But we have different philosophies of how the city should go. You know, there are people who, for instance, you could look at it as the vehicles we drive. Some people drive SUVs, some drive nice luxury sedans, some drive pickup trucks, and so on. And we all get to the same place with all different capabilities and so on. I think that the example of tonight with the NB3, I think that's the well issue. I think we're going to have the city and the growers work together for one goal, a win-win for everybody, and that's what we should be striving for in everything we do here. All of us on the council, all of you voted for us. We are up here. All of us have our strengths and our weaknesses. But I think as together we can pull forward and make things happen. Some people have a background where they are, it makes them more fiscally conservative than others. Others are liberal as far as spending, and some people feel you have to spend money to make money, but some people think that you have to be very cautious in the amount of money you spend because you might not have the opportunity to have it at a later time. I think that all of us want the directors here to have increases in salaries, but again, we have people up here who want to look at the full budget, and I think we'll all do that. Again, compromises for all of us. We appreciate all of you showing up tonight and staying this late, and we still have to go into closed session for one item, but again, we thank you for everything. I appreciate the debate that we have between everybody, and I encourage all of you, if you feel something or think something, come up and say it, because we might not agree with it, I might not agree with it, but it'll trigger certain thoughts that we might have, and we can come up with that ideal solution for the city that we all dearly love. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Sir?
Next meeting, I'll try to bring back some of my thoughts from the workshop that we did last Friday, and have those be as continuing items or discussion items for future meetings. Because we talked a lot and left a lot off the table, and we need to come we need to come back to those things. So anyway, I have nothing else tonight. Thank you,
sir. Sir?
I'm good.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you again so very, very much. Have a great evening. We're going to be going back into closed session.
Are you going to report? They have to decide on
Are you serious? 5 hours from now, you will come up with something.
Maybe. Listen to
No.
me, seriously. Nick bought all the water rights. He sold the water rights, listen to me, Fremont Valley to Dominguez Water. This was back in the 60s.
Okay, all right.
Okay? The water rights that are Wonder Acres, no.